train before the evacuated or up and down the train and nobody's followed.
Okay, the train is designed to provide emergency support systems. The emergency the batteries there, the UPS there, they actually support the train ventilation and some emergency lighting for a period of 45 minutes. Yes. And that 45 minutes is what we deem is more than adequate time for a fully loaded train to actually detrain. And that has been tested and, on every train that we purchased. So the issue of availability of the emergency supply is there. Question is that, of course, if it takes longer than the 45 minutes, then the once the emergency systems or supply runs out, then you will have the complaints about stuffiness and stuff like that.
I think also a point I had made earlier about providing timely and accurate information, particularly to the commuters that were most affected in the trains itself. You see, if you're stuck in a place that is semi-lit, and it's getting a little bit stuffy and so on, with different degrees of tolerance for different people, I think it's all the more important that we feed information to them that this is what is happening, how long it takes, for the rescue team to come. Do you wait so that the train is going to be put into the station, or do you get the passengers to detrain and walk along the track to the nearest station? That kind of information, I think, needs to, as soon as a decision is made, be fed to the commuters that are stuck on board the train. And I think in the incident on Thursday, my feel, following it from afar, is that it wasn't timely enough, and certainly there was not enough hand-holding of the commuters within the trains itself.
How many passengers are affected?
This morning? No, I don't have the numbers with me.
Okay. I want to ask LTA, since the two operators have ramped up the number of train trips, I think SMRT alluded to it yesterday that because of the increased train runs, time of maintenance has really been shortened. Since then, has LTA, so-called tightened its SOP for checks on maintenance and its regime? And you spoke about regular inspections. How regular are these? Can you be more specific on that? Because I think the public wants to know how regular do they actually do all these inspections.
Yeah, I don't have the information on me, particularly on the current collector and the but I can give you the information after this meeting, after this briefing. As far as in terms of availability of time, I think that's the job of the operator to manage the fleet of trains. They've got trains that they use for operations, and basically there will be trains that are not required during peak hours, for example. And so during off-peak hours, there are opportunities for SMRT and SBST to maintain those trains. And that's how the trains are procured with a certain level of spares. So this is the whole idea of having spares to allow for all this maintenance. So there shouldn't be any compromise in terms of time taken, despite the fact that they are now running more trains. Because whatever they run is still not as frequent as during the peak hour itself. So there will be enough time and facilities, in our view, for both the operators to maintain the trains.
So you've got different maintenance regimes. There are some where you need to take the train off for an extended period of time. And this we will have to do, for example, when we launch into the signal upgrading. So a number of trains will always have to be withdrawn for service, and for a number of months, they will just be put under upgrading regime. All right. And then there are other maintenance that you can do at short notice. Okay, you don't need such an extended period of time. The way we have sized up the fleet is that we size it up for the requirements in the peak hours operations with some buffer, some reserve. Okay, both for extended maintenance as well as if there are some breakdowns along the train, and we are able to introduce these trains that are held in reserve. And once the peak hour period is over, some trains are then withdrawn, and you do some of your routine maintenance that may take a number of hours, and then they are reintroduced into service again. So it really depends on which part of the maintenance regime you want more information on, and we can work with LTA as well as SMRT to provide you more on that.
Minister, may I ask whether there is any plan to also thoroughly check those down CCL as well, because since there are so frequent breakdown on Circle Line as well?
I think if you look at Circle Line today, if I'm not wrong, so far, and LTA can correct me if I'm wrong, we have had the same number of incidents this year as we have had for the CCL last year. Okay, I don't have the information a little bit earlier than that, but from what they told me, fewer incidents on the Compass lines, same number of incidents on Circle Line this year versus last year. What we see over the last couple of months, I think, is as a result, if I'm not wrong, of introducing stages 4 and 5 into operations. And every time you do something like that, even though you would have run through checks for an extended period of time before you start it for revenue service, I think the experience has always been that it will take a number of months before things stabilize, both in terms of the defects, the incidents, as well as the number of passengers. So to me, it is that at this particular point in time, we are watching the Circle Line very closely. We have still yet to complete the investigation into the incident that happened. The Dakota station was October, 20th September. They have not yet been able to complete the investigation, and when that is completed, we will of course release it for public information. All right, but overall, when we look at the statistics, there has not been a significant difference between what we see this year versus in previous years, even though we have been operating now a larger extent of the Circle Line.
So you're saying it's teething problems, it's not that worrying?
I think we will have to accept that every time we open a new section of a rail network, it will take a number of months before it stabilizes. All right?
Mr. In both incidents, when the train line went down, there was a tremendous load as the crowd sort of surged out, and then there was a major load on the road network as well as the bus network. Does that, and also maybe possibly the fact that LTA now has to help SMRT cope the network and all that, strengthen the case for centralization of our transport system, maybe perhaps under one operator, or maybe even changing the ownership structure?
I'm not so sure that we will immediately jump to that as the solution. You see, when say you have a train breakdown and you decide that, yes, I'm going to start bus bridging service because I'm not going to be able to recover train services in a number of minutes. It is not as if the buses are pre-positioned, along, say, for example, the north-south stretch. They have to assemble buses, including, like this morning, a number of buses from private operators. So they will put their buses in, those that are held in reserve. They may, even if necessary, pull buses from the normal services to augment this, deploy it along different parts of the network, and if necessary, and indeed the case today, call in the private operators to augment that. For Sunday morning, because it is planned in advance, I certainly expect it to run a lot more smoothly. I expect, and indeed it's the case, that they will call in SBST to provide the buses that SBST itself holds in reserve for their own contingencies. All right. So because that is pre-planned, I would expect it to be much better run. But for a contingency event, I think, to be fair to SMRT, they do have the plans in place, but it also takes quite some time, I think 30 minutes or so, before you can actually bring the buses in large numbers, by which time you do have passengers that are dependent on the trains arriving, discharging, waiting. All right. Some of them will go to the basic services, others will be dependent on the bridging service. So there is a build-up, and the more important point really is how quickly can they activate it and how quickly can they clear the crowd. Okay?
Then on Thursday night, there were a lot of commuters over at Orchard and Dhoby Ghaut, the whole stretch, and people were rushing to get up on the bus, resulting in a massive jam. So for tomorrow morning, let's say if it were to happen again, maybe what are some of the views on this?
Well, I think because it is pre-planned and we are giving advance notice, I think commuters will take this into consideration in planning their journeys. That's number one. Two is that we would have the buses assembled already, which is why they're putting the effort in on the fleet of buses, making sure that there is plan in terms of headway and so on and so forth. And Sunday morning, I expect that the travelling pattern is probably going to be somewhat different from Thursday night.
Minister, you started off with your remarks saying that you find the signatures accurate after working at the Toa Payoh station. Do you think you arrive at the same conclusion if you don't buy accordingly?
I'm not so sure that I was reading what was written on the sign as opposed to looking at the light and seeing which direction the arrow was pointing. So I wasn't going up to the sign and seeing what was written on it. I was just looking for an indication, an arrow leading me out because I knew that bus bridging was being provided. Okay? And I purposely refrained from asking anyone just to see if indeed they had the correct signages and the direction signs at the appropriate places. So at both Toa Payoh and Newton, and I dare say that this is only my experience, others may require more information, more signs and so on. But for me, this morning I found that it was adequate.
Minister, has LTA or MRT considered doing a review of itself basically as a regulator and whether the kind of SOP that it's putting in case for the operators is adequate and kind of penalties that you're imposing on operators?
I think there's certainly a review and a thinking as to, in that sense, the penalty regime, and we will look into that. On LTA, my view, having been in MOT for a number of months, is that the organizational structure is in place. The people are experienced. And this is not just in terms of building new lines, but they have retained the expertise in terms of overseeing and regulating operations on the existing lines as well. So the structure is in place. The expertise is sufficient and augmented by new hirees, new people that are coming in. So I dare say that for LTA, it is largely in good order. I think the priority and the focus now really ought to be on the two operators of the train system, in particular on SMRT, to make sure that we do a very thorough health check, not just only of the infrastructure, but if necessary on the organization's procedures and processes to deal with these contingencies. And thereafter, we can look at what else we may need to put the spotlight on.
Minister, would you want to consider also shutting down
the Circle Line and North East Line for a short period of time to do this thorough health check on these two lines also?
I do not see a necessity for this at this point in time. I do not see that.